Good afternoon. We are waiting a little bit while we see the number of participants joining us. I think we are fairly stabilized on the number of participants, so we'll start by welcoming all of you to this live webinar, which is part of the Oslo Innovation Week. We're going to discuss green tech, circular economy, and open innovation and the role of intellectual property. And those are very broad questions. And thus we are so lucky that we have a panel that I will introduce later on, and will go on for 1.5 hours. And I will facilitate the discussion, and I'll do a brief introduction first on some of the topics. So, I mean, the panel we have, they are sharing their experiences of developing new green technologies and services, and from a perspective of innovation and technology management. And we made some observations when we discussed how to frame this, that green tech innovations often depend on collaborations and on standards. That's one interesting aspect of it. And also a circular economy will only develop with bold new business models. And I think we're going to talk both about sustainability and circular economy as a part of that. So whether things are becoming more sustainable and better in that way, or whether it's getting better because we are able to make the economy work and reuse and recycle things. Both are important, and I think intellectual property plays an important role in both of those, and they are very often overlapping. And you will see a lot of other things like models for sharing data, for collaborative innovation, open source software. Those kind of things also come into play. So we'll have a quite open and free discussion on that. There is an interesting background which is in this slide from my colleagues at NTNU, Fanny Hermansdottir and Arild Aspelund, who have a paper in a journal of cleaner production. And I found this very interesting because they say, and they show, that business opportunities that come with the green shift overcome the transition cost. So they not only save, usually we think it's kind of wishful thinking that if we start to work in a better way, then the world will become better, and we draw models and we try to figure out how to do it. But they have actually then done a quantitative study of data from a representative sample of Norwegian manufacturing firms, and they have combined that with the public available financial data and tax data and so on, and they can then see that there's beyond any doubt that the sustainability shift doesn't represent any sort of industry debt, but that the number of size of business opportunities that comes with the green shift overcome the transition costs. So that's a researcher's way of saying that it's profitable to engage in the green shift and engage in the circular economy. So that's the sort of setting that that it's really the economy is actually working, and we're coming back to that because we might discuss a little bit whether the market is already starting to fix these issues, or whether we have to change the way the economy operates and also the way that intellectual property operates. This is like just a reminder that what we are discussing is knowledge, and how we share knowledge, and how we collaborate around knowledge, and how we use that for creating business and for creating competitive advantages. And the whole background on the problem with this is that whenever we use terms like know-how and knowledge, we are not so precise about what we're discussing. And thus intellectual property works in many ways as a tool to show how we are controlling the innovation, how we are controlling this knowledge, and also to make it transactable. So it's a way of ensuring that if we're going to share something, that's also a sort of transaction. And that means that we have to be aware of how the intellectual property, but also other mechanisms are controlling the knowledge that we have. So we can talk for hours around these models and this way of thinking, but that's the sort of way, the connection between knowledge and how intellectual property works as a documentation of the knowledge, and thus can be used for transactions and for sharing. And I'm just jumping back because there's one other point here also, and that is the human relation aspect. Of course, it's not only so that knowledge is embedded in papers and in patents and trade secrets and in copyrighted software and so on. It's also embedded in humans, and that means that our experiences and the way that workforce, that researchers and engineers and people that work with technology are moving between companies is also a very important way of spreading knowledge, and it's also an important way of controlling the knowledge, that you are able to keep people happy in your company, or keep people happy working in the circular economy that your company is a part of, because then they will contribute to that success and to the sharing of knowledge. So at a sort of top level, and sometimes we forget that all this discussion around intellectual property and so on is part of a system that is so important that the United Nations has a separate body for that. So it's called the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, and also all countries have what we call intellectual property offices, and in Norway it's called Patentstyret, NIPO, and they work on enabling transactions of knowledge. And there is an initiative by WIPO, it's called WIPO Green, and they're trying to set up a marketplace for sustainable technology, and they're trying to push on countries or enable countries to work more, for example, on awareness raising activities, or having better tools for analysis how technology is protected by patents or is free for use, and you can see some examples here that, for example, the UK intellectual property, they have a green channel to accelerate environmental friendly patents. So if you have patents, you can speed up the way they are examined by the patent office. They have introduced, this is on a very detailed level, but there are new codes like Y02B and Y02T and so on that are used for classifying the patents. But that again enables statistics and makes it easier to find technology. And you have a lot of reports and going on from, for example, the European Patent Office or from Patentstyret. This morning, I listened to a discussion at Patentstyret on the patent landscaping work that they do, and so I reused one of their slides here. But it just shows, I think it was interesting because it shows that when you come to green technology, then Patentstyret has made a patent landscape analysis showing what's going on in the world. And there you can see things like China, for example, being a very prominent actor in green technology, but they file most of the patents nationally. They don't do so much internationally. You can see that there are a few countries that are setting the trends. You can see a large increase in green patent applications. So the question is then, is that good or is it bad, or is it both? So these kind of reports begin to be available for companies that want to create a strategy for the transition over to a more sustainable business. I just remind you very briefly again about the old, this is a figure from 2016, so it's I mean, it's soon 10 years old, from Catherine Wheatman, but it just shows the terms. You know, we used to have a linear economy where we took things and we made it and we used it and disposed of it and made pollution, and then we're going into a circular economy where we recycle, reuse and remake and recycle things. And the problem perhaps with the current IP system is that it's very focused on the make and use part of it. And as a simple example of that, you had this discussion on whether you are able to repair your mobile phones, and there is a work in a directive coming in the EU and so on that will give a better framework, better legal framework for repairing. But still, you would see that the Supreme Court in Norway said that Apple's trademark was more important than the right to repair, and that was a extreme simplification of the Supreme Court's position on this. But it just shows that we have to balance these systems, and that the market, the economy itself, as it is now, needs perhaps additional rules or tweaks of the system or new systems. So that was just also a part of the setting for our discussion. I attended a research conference earlier this month, and the circular economy IP is a growing field of research, and I found that very encouraging. It's but it's sort of showing, yes, it's both an enabler and a complicating factor for sharing knowledge. This particular presentation or paper in work that I'm showing you is from the University of Cambridge and their Institute for Management of Technology, and they have really gone and interviewed a number of companies to try to figure out what are the main challenges for working together, for working inside the company, with the government and so on. And then you can see that they come up with questions like, for example, IP perhaps contribute to an overall slower transition towards the circular economy. That the process of sharing and knowledge exchange become more complicated because of the rules of intellectual property, and that there are challenges on an industry-wide successful transition, which I think we will debate later, because this is, for example, one of the experiences that I think Suni, one of our panel participants, have. So I think we'll touch upon these issues as well, and we'll touch upon the questions of openness, whether information and data should be open and available for all, or whether you will have, and even if it's open, that you still can have control of the access to this data. And that has to do with also perhaps a transition over time, that you have to first build something within a group of companies before you open it up to everybody else, which is the process that we often call standardization. So a group of people or companies bring a technology up, and then it's open up for everyone in the market to participate and share. So these are some thoughts. I'll very quickly introduce the participants in today's panel. It's Knut Jørgen Egelie. He's the head of IP management at NTNU Technology Transfer. So they're the tech transfer office of the NTNU, Norwegian University of Science and Technology. And We have Suni Aranda. She's a business developer and the principal scientist for sustainable minerals and metals portfolio with the Institute for Energy Technology in Norway. We have Bjørn Simonsen, who is the CEO of Saga Pure, who's a company that's investing in sustainable technology. We have Michael Curtis, who's the founder and CEO of Loopfront, a company that's developing a platform for enabling circular economy, in particular in the building and construction industry. And then there's me. I'm an IP management consultant, and I'll try to steer the discussion in some hopefully fruitful direction. So the roles, what we are thinking, what we're trying to achieve here is a broad discussion based on the different perspectives and experiences that we have. For you participants that are listening to us, we do have a question and answer box that where you can fill in questions and answers. Hopefully we are able to answer them or comment on them as we go along, and if not, we will pick them up and email you some response to that. So with that, I close the brief introduction, and we should see our panel participants, and we should start, I think, with broad a presentation from each of our panelists on around 5 minutes for each of you, and I would then simply like you to introduce yourself and your current work, so people get a little bit more understanding of your engagement in sustainability and the circular economy and intellectual property, and perhaps you can comment on what you see as the greatest barrier to the successful implementation of sustainable solutions. That could be your own solutions or with others, with people you collaborate with. So perhaps Knut Jørgen, if you would like to begin.
Sure, Haakon. Thank you. That was a very philosophical introduction. I like it because this is really philosophy, but it's also very practical. Practical around the use of IP and the future use of IP. And you know, Haakon, we've had a lot of discussions around this in terms of how knowledge could be sustainable for the future, and that's my main message here in today's debate. How we are providing a sustainable future of the access to knowledge. So what we did, Haakon, was that we looked at a number of projects during our work, and the basis for that is that both of us, well, at least I think you also, Haakon, has worked for a number of years professionally in the sphere between academia and industry, and then after a number of years we did these research projects where we started to research what is really going on in accessing and controlling knowledge between industry and academia. Because what we see is that the industry, of course, is more and more turning to academia for knowledge in their pursuit of new and better technologies for the common good. So what we looked at and what I've been more and more engaged in, both in my professional work but also in philosophical discussions with fellow researchers, is the collaboration between universities and industry, because this is essential for academic knowledge to be channeled into the industrial domain. there's no point in, or at least I think it's no point in research if it's not channeled into the public and the industry domain. But companies benefiting from accessing scientific knowledge have some obligation towards universities and the common good as well, and not only, for instance, private shareholders. So what we saw in our research is that there's a number of issues related to secrecy and the allocation of ownership and exploitation around intellectual property when the companies in collaborative research are accessing knowledge. And this may jeopardize some of the norms referred to as open science, for instance. And I was in particular looking at a very exciting technology, which was called CRISPR. And this is, of course, known to many of you, but some of you might know it. But it's a very exciting biotech tool. It's referred to as interspaced short palindromic repeats. And to put it short, it cuts DNA in various ways and make it easier to manipulate DNA and use it in a broader perspective. And one possible use for it is, for instance, improving biotech in terms of fuels and food, for instance. So access to this technology and utilization of the technology is very much dependent on intellectual property, and it's based on originally being developed by universities. So what came into play was, of course, then the contracts between industries wanting to utilize this technology, and we were looking at how contracts were regulating both access and openness of the technology, because this technology is of huge interest to the common good. And what we saw is that it was not optimal regulated, so we suggested some ways, some tools of how to actually regulate this kind of collaborative research. And the final result of our research, both Haakon and myself, was a 2x2 tool that could actually regulate contracts and improve the way we make collaborative efforts between universities and industries in terms of openness and access. Yeah.
What do you see as a barrier, Knut Jørgen? Because in a way you framed it as an ethical question. It was like you say, okay, companies are and even universities that came up with CRISPR, they have an obligation to the public to bring this technology onto the market. And then I was a little bit, I didn't really understand that this biotech CRISPR thing had so much to do with sustainability. But then you pointed out that yeah, it actually is used, for example, for biofuel or recycling of things. So it's an important technology. But is the barrier really a kind of ethical question that people forget to think about the ethics and the obligation to society and so on?
Well, I think so. Yes. I mean, for CRISPR and for many other research results from academia and universities, it's essential that they are being used optimally. But if you have one industry partner and only allowing their sort of shareholder interest and building their company's interest, then you might actually lose out of a lot of other opportunities for that technology. So that's certainly an ethical consideration to allow for broader use of those more critical and broader technologies. Of course, this is not true for every technology, but for a lot of technologies, it needs a broad access in the society. And then we need to have tools that make it accessible on a wider range. Yeah.
So, Suni, you are trying to bring a technology out in or changing the way we do, or changing the mineral industry. It's a big task. What are your reflections?
First of all, thank you for letting me participate, because as disclaimer, I am not an IP expert, but I have been working in 18 years in research with different roles, which is generating IP, trying to protect it somehow, disseminate it and transfer it to make it useful. So from those different roles, I can bring, of course, different interest or points of view. From this generic role, the same as Knut, as a research organization, we have this difficult balance where we have to find the sweet spot where we secure continuity, where we don't put or hinder our own continuity, generating new research, generating new solutions for other industries when we do some research for a customer. At the same time, we have to make sure that that specific company or customer or partner is gaining competitive advantage out of our research. So it is this thin balance where sometimes you have to wonder what it is competitive advantage good enough for that specific customer taking the economic risk on doing that research. But sometimes those methods or those processes or process steps are useful or can be useful for other industries, other companies, not necessarily in the same value chain. So the application areas, the broadness of the patents, the access rights to that research you are generating so you can use in the future for others. And at the same time, following your own mandate as institute, where we are supposed to generate knowledge for society. And then is this definition of who is our final customer and how can we do best or follow the best our mandate? How can we compensate the efforts of a company investing in generating IP so they are competitive enough in the market and they get some benefit out of it. And at the same time, we don't block or hinder further expansion of that new knowledge for other applications or other areas. So it's a very interesting broad area with many angles and different interests and also time frames. For some, normally for the industries, this short-term view, it has to be profitable in today's context or 10 years ahead maximum. For a research organization, is not always a necessary factor. We have to make sure we are prepared for the coming decades as well, and that we have access to certain know-how, knowledge, ideas that can be useful for the upcoming trends that are not mature enough, or the context or the economics are not there yet, but we have to preserve somehow that it can happen when the moment comes. So it's it's not always easy to find this everybody happy sweet spot, and we can elaborate afterwards, because this dilemma between openness or access for or benefit for the open or the whole society versus specific company economic interest is something very related to what you mentioned, Haakon, on the models, the economic model we are applying on IP management or the IP business model itself. So we can discuss if we have the opportunity.
Yeah, you're framing it a lot as a a big balancing act. You're balancing between creating a competitive advantage, working within a model of the economy, and then you have lots of time pressure because research is slow, but you work both with researchers and then you work with industry, and they have to deliver while they are changing. So yeah, Michael, you have oh, and that's an interesting picture of you, Michael, because you have a light bar on top of you, so it looks like you have a halo. So you're probably the you're probably the most saintly one of us, because you're actually delivering something in the marketplace. You have a new offering to organizations out there, counties and companies and so on. So what's your reflections both on what you have achieved so far and what the barriers are?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, thank you, Haakon, for the invitation to speak today. And just to give some context about what we do, just so to be able to frame better my response. So Loopfront, we are a circular economy technology company, and we're helping real estate owners to become more circular in how that they operate and manage their assets. Our goal is the same as our customers, to help them reduce waste. So help them identify what material assets they have, what can be repaired, what can be reused, what can be redesigned, and then to take that data and help them to make better decisions. So this material, we have enough of it here, we can reuse that there, and then to make visible then the savings from all these activities, both financial and environmental. And yeah, so we're working primarily with real estate owners. We're operating today in Norway, Sweden, and Germany. We do see differences between the markets in terms of how they operate. And you know, reflecting on what Knut, Jørgen, and Suni has said, I think it's definitely a balancing act, because you know, what we're doing is, as a technology company, we're in the end trying to create data that enables our customers to create the best reuse and to make the best decisions. And most of the time, when it comes to IP, you know, it's all about who owns the data or who's sitting on the data, and it's definitely a balancing act, because a lot of real estate owners, you know, who are working with this, they're generally afraid of lock-in. You know, that we suddenly take all of the data and we own it and all of these things. So that's a very, you know, something that's definitely at the very front. So we've had to balance that to enable our customers to get going, you know, start trying out working with Loopfront. And, you know, and then there's our IP generation. And we, you know, at the stage we are in our company, we are now starting to gather a lot of data, and now it's a lot of focus on creating so valuable data as possible. And then that becomes the foundation for machine learning models, AI, which is, I'm sure, very relevant for future patents. But until then, we have to remove those barriers, which is getting the customer to feel safe by using Loopfront to host all of their circular related data. We don't want customers to feel that they're locked in with us, or that we own all of their data. So this balancing act, which Suni said, is very relevant.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this sort of transition period that we're in, where everybody's talking about, you know, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and the use of data and so on, is interesting, because again, the IP system isn't really set up for handling that. So a lot of data, for example, we're not sure whether the laws on trade secret will apply, and it's certain that copyright doesn't apply, and then it comes down, how do you actually own it? And then the whole point is actually to sharing it and create new ticks on top of that. So, yeah. So I think that's exciting. And I think that's perhaps, Bjørn, why your company is investing in these kind of exciting technologies, because you like to do exciting things, don't you?
For sure. So we well, it doesn't mean that the more excited we are to invest. Obviously, we want to have a certainty for what we invest in is actually what the founders claim it is, and that there aren't any issues out there with other companies. So I have the pleasure of heading up Saga, which is a green investment company. We're listed on the Oslo Stock Exchange. And we invest in solutions that contribute to a greener future. So that's a very broad basis for investment. And in order to sift down to the companies we believe will be the future winners, we have industry experts in-house that have decades of experience within the focus areas that we invest. I have about 15 years of hydrogen industry experience. We have people with more than 2 decades from specific fields within renewables, within the ammonia sector, and also within the maritime space. So those areas we feel most comfortable entering, and we invest and are also a very active investor once we have put the investments in there. So we take a board seat. We also work together with management. Sometimes we have an interim management position in the company. So obviously, when we invest in something, it's with the skin and teeth, and we certainly want to make sure it's what they claim it is. Obviously, it helps to have the industry expertise in-house, but also we also like to look at their patent situation. And for our case, although we would like to see a fast transition out there where lots of companies can contribute to the green transition, we obviously want to make sure that whatever we invest in has protection for what they are doing for a number of years to come, and also that they indeed have freedom to operate. With the patents system, we also get a third person view on the technology, which also is a good data point for us. But also with the element in mind that a patent application is far from a granted patent. So there is also some traps you can go into with regards to evaluating that and that alone. But I mean, we see big opportunities within this space, although it's still very early stage. And the study you referred to, Haakon from NTNU, confirms our long-term view of this. But obviously, there's still quite a distance to go. And with regards to barriers, there could be many elements to point at here, but I think with regards to the space that we are investing in and to enable good business cases for those companies, regulations is the main barrier and enabler. If you have the right regulations put in place, so in politics, then you can have pretty much any development you want. I mean, if you look at the battery electric success in Norway, that's regulation and politics for you. I'm sure if the Norwegian government subsidized swimming pools for everyone, we would see a lot of swimming pools around also. Maybe not the best thing these days with the energy prices, but obviously we have seen how politics and regulations can play a role and is also playing a role within the green transition. But there you also have the accelerator and the brake in one and the same element.
Would you see, for example, I mentioned things like the patent system being able to prioritize green technology. Is that something you would see as important as an investor, or is it?
No. From our perspective,
a very detailed question, so sorry about that, but it just struck me.
From our perspective, obviously we want things to be as easy as possible from our point of view, but obviously there are a lot of other good causes out there. It's not just clean energy that will make things better in the world. So I think the priorities of patents, I think the patents should be prioritized in general, because patents is a measurement of new development, new initiative, and new technologies, which most are good for society. So yeah, I don't think to have a special shortcut on the green space will be the way forward. I think rather these systems around it, the regulations to foster growth, to foster new companies within these sectors where we see we need extra boost. I think that's maybe where the effort should be done.
Yeah, I think that was a good response. That is more about having the right system than going in and doing these small easy things. But then again, very small things matters, like this. I mentioned this new Y type of code, so that you can actually identify the technologies and patents in the system that relates to circular economy and sustainability. That's suddenly become important, because otherwise researchers were not able to see what happened. So there's lots of small things. We decided to have a big question for the audience to ponder about while we are discussing, and that's a question on whether the circular economy can coexist with a market economy. It's a very fussy question, and it's a big question. But I think hidden in that is this notion of whether the market and the current mechanisms we have are able to bring us over to a circular economy, or whether we need to have lots and lots of more regulations, and I think it's sort of set in what you said. If the research paper of Aspelund and Hermundsdottir or it's the other way around actually, it's Hermundsdottir and Aspelund on that paper, is right that the profit is higher than the transition cost for entering into Greentech, then it should happen by itself. But on the other hand, perhaps it goes too slowly. So that's the question we are throwing out to our participants, and that we will see an answer to as we discuss on. So I think that here it comes up to us as well. I think we panelists shouldn't answer, because then we're sort of cheating, because we are supposed to know the answer to the poll. But of course you can answer if you like. I wondered a little bit about the about business models, Michael, and you are creating digital twins in a business. You're creating a new business model, or you're applying it. I mean, you're not you have competitors, so you're not the only one out there, but you are thinking about new ways of making a business for the circular economy. And could you say anything about your experience from coming out in the market with a new business model, and sort of saying, oh, we have a new model, you can work in this way, and then you have clients or customers that are perhaps more reluctant because they don't want to share their data, or as you say, they have other thoughts.
Yeah, sure. I think, firstly, I think there's a lot of in the last maybe year, 2 years, a lot of business models, or circular business models, that are probably not mature enough, or should I say, a lot of the models need to become more mature before they are going to be widely used. And one example of that is probably our very first business model, where we got great feedback from customers that, you know, this looks great to use, but at the same time we got feedback that it's our business model would be too expensive or wouldn't suit at scale. And what I mean is that where we're trying to go from helping customers reuse some materials on some projects, for them to think circular economy as a central part of their sustainable strategy. So not having just using circular economy on 1 or 2 projects here where they can pay a small subscription cost for that project, but actually to procure Loopfront as a central part of sustainability strategy, so that circular economy is widely used throughout their portfolio. So we had to mature our business model to accommodate both small customers and those really, really large customers, because they're the ones that, you know, are giving us the chance to survive at the start. And our business model has also to expand to be able to incorporate those actors within the circular economy where their portfolios or their assets are probably more static. What I mean by that is that the circular economy kind of depends on a certain amount of liquidity. I mean materials that have to be available, materials that are in demand, and for that to work as part of your business model, you really have to think about interaction, which means trying to get as many people involved to work with the circular economy, because they generate interaction, and interaction generates transactions, and transactions generates income, to say it like that. So business models have to definitely evolve, that if you have 1 or 2 users, and there's only so many materials that 1 or 2 users can register or book, so you kind of have to really think about how to reach as many as possible, and then give a kind of have a business model that you're able to scale basically from 1 or 2 locations up to entire organizations. So
yeah, are you answering, because you mentioned lock-in effect a bit earlier, and you said that your clients were worried. Are there emerging standards in your field so that a customer could easily leave Loopfront and go to another vendor of that kind of platform, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a risk assessment about what other platforms could they go to, and that kind of our assessment is that there's probably not so many, and there is also even though there is competitors, there are different kind of initiatives as well. So it wouldn't be a perfect match for them to, if they're looking for something similar, then what they have, then it wouldn't be a perfect match. So, but we accommodate that when you sign an agreement with us, it's your data. However, we have the right to use the data to create analysis, to create reports, basically, so that we can use that data to build upon our own IP, and also just partnerships. Because you also have, there's a wider value chain here. It's not just those who own the assets that are involved in the circular economy, there's also service providers. And very soon we're going to have more and more, I call them reuse entrepreneurs, who want to offer different types of services. Perhaps they want to sell surveying services, or they want to sell repair services. These, basically, it's like, in the old days when you built a motorway, after that came gas stations, tire stations, and this is the same with circular economy. There's going to be add-ons to it, and you have to facilitate that this can happen. So, but also there's a balance. So our partners, if they involve themselves and are providing their services through Loopfront to our customers, then that data that's generated is also that's not owned by our partners, that's owned by us. Simply because we can then make sure that data is not fragmented, because they don't be able to create any value from it or build IP.
Suni, you got a lot of money from the EU Commission to get together a collaboration between universities and industry and to try to reform a complete industry. And so you're at the completely other end. I mean, Michael is out there selling his things, and when will you be able to sell your thing, and and how heavy is it to sort of try to change a complete industry?
That's a very interesting question. It can vary a lot. Luckily, I've been in contact with or on charge of the portfolio of the whole department, and we always have in research organizations like IP, we have let's say different maturity. We have a pipeline of newer, more disruptive ideas that we try to mature over time, and then we have some other ongoing, let's say, more mature initiatives that we luckily can see being transferred to startups or bigger companies. In some cases, it's smaller methods, instruments, things like that, and in other cases, it's more ambitious, radical innovation for the value chain. This European project is more on that line, proposing alternative sources for a very robust existing industry, the aluminum industry, exploring alternative materials. So it's more disruptive, it's more risky, and it can generate a lot of new IP. So in that sense, it's a very interesting project to deal with. And it's a good example also on how sustainable technologies, if we can generalize with that term, are getting more and more complex, where multidisciplinarity is involved regarding the different areas of knowledge, combining scientific knowledge on materials, energy, and then social aspects, and environmental sciences, and other complementarity knowledge areas. And that makes the IP puzzle very complex over time. So it's and we are also very different partners in this type of big initiatives with different interests and pace. As I mentioned before, the timing and the understanding of timing is very different. So it's not easy to navigate. The IP can become really complex because you start entering codependent patents or IP pieces, where you have some of it is the background of the different partners, and some of it is the results from the project, and some other parts of the knowledge or of the puzzle is co-joint. And you have to keep track and try to make sure that nobody steps on everybody's toes. That is very connected to your slides, Haakon, where you said, it's been detected a big increase on patents on green technology. That's not a random happening. That's a consequence of the social change and industrial change we are living in the last 2 decades, where we are transitioning from purely economic driving force for research into sustainable. So the 3 pillars: economic, social, and environmental. And it's more and more technologies where the core driving force is fighting global change and improving environmental aspects. So it's not any longer the pure focus on making a better product or saving money or cost for the companies, but many of them are purely green. How can we adjust the IP business model? And that can apply to ALSICAL project and many other projects. Because the purely economic model we are using, I think, is obsolete. I think it is not good enough for the needs. We need to make sure that we don't block the fastest possible transition. We cannot ignore the fact that the advances have to be profitable for the ones taking the risk. So for the companies, they have to have that, because it's the model we have today. but can we adjust it? I don't say change it, but adjust it in a manner that we don't hinder access to this technology for the other countries, other generations, and so on. And I think that this specific action of this whiteboard, this labeling of green patents is a good start. We have green certificates for products, right? And now they are starting to label patents as green. But can we go farther than that? Can we have specific regulations to those where, for instance, we force the industrialization of patents within a certain period of years? If not, you are forced to transfer or sell at the cost of it. So it's not kept in a drawer. Can you make codependent patents a priority, that you have to make it available so you don't block the full technology to be deployed just because one piece of the process is not interested? This type of follow-up of what happens with a green patent once it's patented, because that can be a blockage if nobody implements it, or if it's not handled afterwards in the right manner. And that's our main concern. It's not that we don't want patents, we want them to be industrialized and useful, right?
Yeah. Those are very interesting thoughts. And I wonder, Bjørn, I'm calling on you because you're from the sort of other side of this spectrum of interests here. And would you think that investors would try to actively be engaged in solving such questions as Suni puts up? Like you have a blocking technology somewhere, or a patent that's blocking the development of a technology, and you would like society, the government, to interfere in some way. This has happened, for example, in the development of the airplane industry in the US. You had patents that sort of blocked every development of the airplane industry, and the government then would come in and give licenses to firms that needed it. So all countries have really laws and regulations that allow it, but they don't dare to use it because the government is so afraid of interfering with the market. And so, as an investor, how do you see this, Bjørn?
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, both for if you look from the environment perspective, obviously we want all good solutions deployed globally as soon as possible. And even though we didn't share the IP, we obviously want the company or IP holder to develop that technology. So it's an important question which is extremely difficult to answer, at least in a good way. Should you have for example a limited amount of years where you should have some progress in terms of the IP you have patented? Is that an option? Should the patent last for a shorter amount of time, depending on where you are in the technology stage? Yeah, perhaps. But obviously, the patent holder or the IP holder needs to be both protected and rewarded, right? Because if from an investment perspective, I know that whatever research and development I'm investing in will be available for all others after I've put in 100 million NOK or dollars or whatever, then why should I invest? So I think we need to keep the sense of urgency and how we can actually foster progress, but also how that can be done sustainably. I mean, our mission in Saga Pure is pure growth, right? And that means continued growth and prosperity on a global scale in line with environmental sustainability. But not just that, because If we don't deliver as an investment company, well, then we don't exist, because we need to deliver a return for our investors, which then could want to provide us more cash to invest with, which in turn would accelerate the development that we want to achieve on a global scale. So we need to find a way that enables both a sustainable environment and a sustainable business environment.
Yeah, that's a good reflection. We have a question from the audience that I'm going to throw at Knut Jørgen, but we also have the results from our poll, and I think we should have a look at that, because it was very much in line with what you were talking about now, Bjørn. So we have the question: the circular economy in the market, can it coexist? Can it exist within a market economy? And 67% says yes, because a market-based economy will adapt, and only 7% says no, we need to change the fundamentals of the economy. And then we have 4% that are perhaps a bit like Knut Jørgen and me, who says we need more research on that. But no, it's 27% who says that we need more research. But that's a fairly optimistic view on that the market-based economy actually will adapt. And you have your hand up, Suni. And you can absolutely interrupt me at any time. I encourage you to interrupt when you have something good to say. But you have some comments on this before I ask Knut Jørgen about more about open innovation. But
yes, it's for making very clear that I'm on the same boat as Bjørn, because they are with today's frame and rules of the game, they are the enablers. We need those investments. We need the ones taking the risk. So we cannot change one end of the story. We cannot change the regulation on the patents without changing on the distribution of the risk. So it needs, I mean, the 27% of I'm not sure, we should discuss it further. if I could answer. So I'm not saying that the model is not correct. It's the one we have, and we have to deal with it. But we should be open to adjust it in a better manner, to make sure that the green patents or the green technologies are fostered, are promoted, are enabled somehow, and we don't block them. So to make sure that we are not missing some pieces and parts, and we are blocking our own path for the transition. So that's my position. So I'm very big friend and grateful for companies like Bjørn's, because they are the ones actually bringing it to the market today. So just for clarity.
That's good. We had a question from the audience, from Anders Hermansson, who asks, could you elaborate on issues related to open innovation combined with protecting your proprietary technology, especially related to know-how? We've been sort of circling around that, but Knut Jørgen, this is, I mean, you are there at the what would be the front end of the university, but you are in the position at the university where you are trying to bring the research over to business to ensure that research results are utilized, and so almost per definition the university is engaged here in open innovation. It's hard to see that a university is acting in a closed innovation model where they only bring things forward without collaborating with others. So you have to think collaboration all the time, but then also the university actually owns knowledge, and that's related to know-how, and on the other hand, the university perhaps feel obligated to have that public. And what's your reflection on all of that? I know it's a little bit what you said in the start, but yeah.
Well, you know, it's again about sustainability. I mean, we're probably required to be as open as possible, but at the same time, you know, and we have discussed this many times, Haakon, but often research is closed as well. You know, for a number of years, researchers keep their results to themselves in order to be sort of first to the market or first to the science community. So they really keep their research to themselves. And that is something that a lot of people don't actually appreciate, that research in itself, it's not open per se. It's about how we as a university provide openness mechanisms. And open innovation is a term that has been misused and used for a number of years. But what we put into open innovation is the control situation on where we're able to provide access to the technology in many different channels. So both to industry, to the science community, and also further research and education at NTNU and other universities. That's open innovation in a sort of sustainable way, is maybe my first comment to that question.
But it's a good comment in that you say knowledge that's created in universities where needs to be available for more research and of course for teaching. So already there's a kind of limitation on what's coming out from or how the access is to the research results when the university is involved.
Yeah, that's true. But it's about what we researched, Haakon, about the different stakeholders' need into the knowledge. I mean, there's different motivations for industries versus academia in terms of what their needs are for the knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, we saw contracts. Just a background: Knut, Jørgen, and I were allowed to read around 4,000 contracts that are actually confidential, but that are the basis for R&D collaborations funded by the Research Council of Norway. And so we're not able to say much about each contract, but I remember we found contracts where it stated on one hand that everything could be kept secret of the research results, and then in the next sentence they said, but everything has to be made public. And so probably both parties, both the industry and the university, were very happy because they had their particular conditions in there, although they were very much conflicting, and probably the Research Council never read that contract. So the important thing was really to get the funding for the project to go on, and then I suspect that the people engaged in that collaboration were really sensible researchers and business people, and their plan was to figure out as they saw the results come what to do best of them, because a lot of this is about parties trusting each other and learning how to work together. And as I suspect, Suni, that you had quite a steep learning curve when you, as a research institute, you work with both industry and academia and university, and they have very different objectives with that collaboration.
Yes, we have our, let's say, tricks and tips on how to solve this equation in most of the projects. For me, and in general, my understanding is that the research result, again with the existing model, belongs to the one investing on it, taking the risk. So it's a matter of who is putting the effort. It's wrong and unfair, even apart from my belief illegal, to tell a company, thank you for your 20 million kroner. Now we'll publish all the results because our mandate is to share the knowledge with society. They will not be happy or coming back to work with us for sure. So normally When it's a company covering the cost of that research, 100%, the company owns that IP. And then we have the mixed projects, partly public funding, public companies. So one usual manner or tool we use is the access rights, that the ownership of the IP belongs to the one generating, and then the company has certain access rights for certain application areas, or the other way around. The company owns the results, but IP in this case keeps the rights to access or use that new know-how, technology, whatsoever method for other application areas, not in conflict or in direct competition with the owner. So there are ways to deal with it, but it's very hard because when you generate knowledge, it's not always for that specific problem. Normally, if lucky, it can be applied hopefully for many other application areas, for many other industries and companies. So it's about making sure that you can still use that knowledge without harming the one that put the money and the risk at the starting point. So it's more about making sure that everybody knows what they can expect from the project before you start the project. If not, big problems can arise for sure.
Yeah. Have you experienced that the sort of contractual setting and the agreements and so on that you were encouraged or you had to do to get the funding from the public money from the EU Commission, that this setting is suitable for your way of thinking about a transition to a more sustainable way of producing, or is the the contractual framework and all of that more in the old linear model?
I think they give certain freedom to choose and decide within the consortium, and it varies a lot on the maturity of the technology you are talking about. So when it's 100% public funding, of course, and you bring to the table your idea or your organization's idea, the companies have to, go with the flow and accept pretty much the conditions you want to negotiate with them in this case, because they are not taking the risk, the economic risk. But when it's more mature technology where companies have to contribute to the project financing, then it's very different, and it's very case by case. How can you negotiate and find a good enough solution for everybody? And it's not the commission limiting that. As long as you agree with the consortium, I believe that they on one hand is very good because they give the freedom for us to decide. On the other hand, they are not promoting or testing a new way of dealing with green technologies. And again, we come back to that discussion that we can expect in the coming years some changes on that direction. Can we treat the same IP or patents that are specific for the green transition compared to the ones that are specifically for economic profit or efficiency of one company and so on? Let's say the basic improving the business as usual technologies and so on. We'll see. The EU is not really giving any specific direction on that sense. They give us the freedom to negotiate in the consortium.
Are you worrying, Michael, on the development of the regulatory framework? Like there's a very strict framework for pharmaceuticals and health technology where you have to go through all kind of documentation and clinical testing and things, and we see now that a similar regulatory regime will probably come in place around, for example, artificial intelligence, so that you have to be much more open on how you do your magic of machine learning and that you can demonstrate that you're not doing something that's dangerous to the public, like that you are recycling a lot of building materials that are inferior and shouldn't have been recycled or even dangerous, and all these kind of things. But do you sort of feel that the regulatory framework for your business is developing in a way that enables you to share and work with other companies and so on, or are you worried?
I think there's a good balance right now. I think 2022 has definitely been a year where a lot of both incentives and relaxing of regulatory requirements. And I think that it's Norway has said that they want to become one of the leading countries working with circular economy, and we're starting to see that now with the regulatory changes. So if I said it 2 years ago when we were at the beginning, then I would have said that there's a lot of room for improvement. I think now this year, last year, that's become a lot easier now in terms of now there's a requirement that before you even can demolish a building, you have to do a reuse assessment. You have to understand the CO2 content, materials in your building. If you want to get some types of environmental certification, you have to do a certain amount of material reuse, etc. So I think all of these things are building up to enabling, and even and in fact, what's surprising is that there doesn't need to be many incentives. Back at the start, I thought everything would have to be financed, support, I mean, from the government. But thankfully, some of the incentives, they are more than sufficient, I think, to get a lot of customers to start thinking more about circularity for the organization. And then back just to comment very quickly about AI and artificial, about machine learning, is that right now there is I would say very little, not so very many examples of AI that works for the circular economy. And one of the main reasons for that is because we don't have the tools, we don't have the softwares, solutions that are able to gather data in a way that give good metadata, to say like that, that enable, and that's now starting to come. What's interesting there is that we're even looking at the potential of creating a machine learning model that is accessible to all. Of course, there's some IP discussion there, but the more data you have, the better machine learning model, and then the opportunity to create AI for the circular economy can come a lot quicker. So making an open machine learning model, that is something that I think that could happen in the short period.
I think that's very exciting, and it's almost like having an open machine learning standard is almost like having an open standard, or it's a new way of thinking about the standardization, that people sort of agrees on what's important and what's not important and how to use such a model. You said also that that Norway has sort of decided to become a big actor in the circular economy. We have there's an interesting discussion also going on with the potential with NIPO and the engagement on that the government now has on increasing the export from all other fields than oil and gas to have an increase of 50% of export, and where something to consider is really that unless you have a control over what you export, the technology, you can of course achieve a 50% raise in export, but it will drop pretty soon as your competitors will move in, unless you have some sort of mechanism for holding it there, and then intellectual property becomes a very one of the tools that you need to have.
Are you saying like defensibility?
Pardon?
Defensibility?
Yes, I mean you have both to be able to to control your technology in the way that, or your data in the way that you can give access to those who you want to collaborate with, but also to gain an early market position, and then perhaps the branding that you are building is so strong that people will prefer your company, even if the same data or the same models are available for everyone else. So if everyone else has an access to the same artificial intelligence models, then, for example, for Loopfront, it will be really a question of do we believe that the quality or the service that we get from your company is worthwhile paying a little bit extra, or giving you a competitive advantage, or giving you more clients, and the same. But I wondered about one thing, Bjørn, on the investment side, and that is, how do you see the balance between investing with Norwegian companies and investing in foreign companies? Do you see any difference in how they think about intellectual property or controlling their innovation and so on? A reason I ask is that we have some interesting unpublished, or it's a little bit published but not so much published, data that shows that if you have foreign investors in the company, then they tend to take the questions of intellectual property more serious, perhaps to compensate for not being so familiar with the market and with the home market and environment and so on. We don't know yet, but it just strikes me that I had this image that you were investing a lot in Norwegian companies and so on. But do you see any difference, or is that simply because this is where you know the market, you know the people, you know the quality of the companies that you invest in? And is intellectual property in any way mitigating for your lack of knowledge of the persons and the companies?
I mean, we are ourselves, for all practical matters, a startup company. I mean, we've existed for 2 years, so it's only natural that we look around our own duck pond first before we go out into the world searching for the good investment opportunities. That said, we're not limited to Norway alone, but from our perspective, we rather, at least so far, have looked for opportunities in Norway, obviously with international potential, otherwise it would not be an interesting investment opportunity, and also where we would rather connect the company with investors from abroad, and also look at interesting acquisition targets outside of Norway. Obviously, to do a due diligence on a company on the other side of the world with no people on the ground is a more challenging task than doing it in Norway. So yes, patents and the strength of those patents would certainly be just as and yes, indeed, more important than for the Norwegian market. But I'd say that it's important whether you're a Norwegian company or a non-Norwegian one. It's then we'd spend more time on the team. Obviously, in Norway, the due diligence on the team and the board is much easier than it is other places, and then we'd rather need more assistance from a local, either a bank or a broker or some other representative to help us get the full picture of the company, because obviously, yeah, the IP is important, but if you have a shitty team, it doesn't matter what you have as your core technology in order to take things to the market and succeed.
Yeah, I think it's an important insight. I'm just smiling because I'm thinking about a couple of times we've been into, assisting in a due diligence situation, and we started to realize that the core competence of the company was really within one or two persons, and it was extremely critical that these persons were happy and stayed on in the company, and of course the more you can balance that with other things like owning the software or having some sort of control through patents or something, that is good, but it's still very often depending on persons or how well teams are working for controlling technology. We have lost Knut Jørgen in our panel because his battery went flat, which means that there is an urgent need for better batteries. And I think we can look forward to a world where the batteries of our computers will last for longer. So I'm not sure if he will be able to join us for the conclusion. We are coming to a sort of end of our discussion. I think we have touched upon lots of interesting issues. So I would have appreciated talking for many more hours with you and being able to follow some of these insights that you have. But if you got like 30 seconds or a minute to each of you, what are your sort of takeaways or advice to people listening to us? Michael, would you?
I think for us at least, just discovery of potential IP was by having very close discussions with potential customers, just because trying to figure out what they need of solutions, and that closeness, understanding that customer really, really well, in many ways is our IP. So, and that's something that's very particular to the circular economy, is that there is no real good standards yet or very established processes. So it's kind of like discovery, and those who can discover the customer's need the fastest regarding circular solutions, I think they will benefit enormously.
A very good point. Thanks, Michael. We got a last minute question from Vanati in the questions and answers, and the question is it profitable to invest in international companies after Corona lockdown? What would you say, Bjørn? Has the Corona, the last time we had this Oslo Innovation Week was Corona, and we had a discussion on resilience and the effect of intellectual property on a company being resilient. But now the question is, has anything changed with the investment environment, or?
Well, we are possibly entering or in a depression right now in the financial markets, if you pay attention to what's happening on the Oslo Stock Exchange and the stock exchanges around the world. So we've gone from a green euphoria to basically an energy crisis and inflation, which is toppling the markets. So it's extremely risky to invest at this stage. And of course, even more important to know what you're investing in actually has a merit in a few years from now. But of course, with the turbulence and with the downturns in the markets, there will be plenty of room for profitable investments also. But of course, the trick is to pick the right ones at the right time.
Suni, can you build on that, because you're developing just this technology that Bjørn is asking for, I think.
Once again, on the.
I mean, you are Bjørn pointed to the sort of crisis that we have, and that affects how we think about energy, for example. And you're in the middle or in the beginning, perhaps, of developing and creating this new platform, this new technology for a whole industry. And do you have an optimistic view on?
I think we are living in a very uncertain but important and positive. I'm positive moment on the transition of the energy revolution or change, merging with the materials revolution and the digital revolution combined. So we can expect big things happening and big things changing. And together or along with that, we see how the hydrogen and the CO2 value chains are mixing and merging with the metallurgy value chains, with the zero waste necessities, the sustainability on how do we implement those technologies for energy and renewables. What do we do with the end of life of those renewable devices? It's very much connected. At the end, we are made of energy and matter, and we are still scratching how can we use better our knowledge on those and combine the different disciplines in better solutions. It is a never-ending process. Digitalization will definitely help. So I'm positive that we are on the right direction. And I think that along with that thought, that we can expect as well, how do we handle IP, knowledge and information will evolve naturally. I mean, it's as old as humanity, and it's a never ending. There's no right or wrong response for all these matters. That's more or less my conclusion. It's very positive to be open-minded and put on the table what do we need for today's society and today's context, so we are sustainable also tomorrow.
I think that was a very good conclusion, Suni. We need, for open innovation to happen, we need to be open-minded, and it is really changing, and that makes it very exciting to work with the sustainability and circular economy questions now. And I'm very, very happy that you took the time to join us for this panel debate. I'm very happy that we have participants. We are now like 2 minutes over, so I'll close down our session. But thank you a lot to our participants for the questions and for also the preparations you have done for this discussion to participate as a panel. So thank you very much to all, and then I think we will continue discussing this the next time we meet. Thank you.